Okay, so I will be talking while I write in the objective very quickly so we can kind of limit the size of this one. I'm not going to lie, equation of a circle is a very complicated subject. It's going to use completing the square, which, since it's not a standard necessarily tested anymore in Algebra 2, we skip over it. So it used to be taught in Algebra 2, so then when you got to geometry, it wasn't that bad. So now, in this section, we will have to use completing the square, and it's above what you typically do in Algebra 2. So it's going to be a little bit complicated, especially because most of you guys probably are seeing it for the first time. Some of you may have learned it in Algebra 2. I know for a fact some of the honors courses, they do cover it, and then maybe even in Algebra 1, you may have talked about it as well. But it's a very easy one to use. The only thing I don't like is the lessons that we have here are not very good to the mastery test questions that are asked. To be honest, they're just difficult, and I'm not going to lie. I took it, and I mean, I could do it, but it took a while. It took probably a good 30 minutes to get the test done, which means it's probably going to take you guys over an hour. And it just took me that long, not because of how difficult it was, just because I had to do a lot of work, and I already knew what I was doing. So it's going to be a little bit tough. So to help with this, I'm actually I printed out the mastery test. I'm not going to give you the answers to them, but on each one, I'll give you a hint on what to do. I won't do it on this video. I'll do it in another video because this one's going to get pretty long if I do that. So what I'll do is I'll upload this one, and then later on, maybe in a day or two, I'll upload the mastery test one. So you might want to try it just without my help, see how you can do. And then if absolutely you can't, I'll upload the mastery test. And again, I'll send an email when I do that. And it will not be the answers, but it'll give you a hint as to what to do. Okay. So anyways, so now we're going to move on to the actual lessons that we're going to be doing. So this is equation of a circle. In this lesson, you'll derive the equation of a circle of a given center and radius. So it's simple when they give you those two things, but of course it's never that easy. Of a given radius, and you also sometimes have to complete the square. So, and complete the square. To find the center and radius. So when they don't give it to you, you have to find the center and radius of a circle given by an equation. To be honest, the tutorial is not that bad, and then when you get to the questions on the mastery test, they're just like the way that you have to solve for them is extremely hard. They weren't presented to you like that on the tutorial. I'm not sure why they do that, but what I am going to do is I'm probably going to find maybe links to a few other maybe YouTubers, links to maybe some pages where I can find some good explanations with maybe some more complicated explanations of equations, of a circle. So I'll try to do that and link them in the email when I do upload these and send them to you guys. Okay, the equation of a circle. By definition, all points on the circle are equidistant from the center of the circle. As you might imagine, the algebraic definition of a circle is based on the distance formula, which we use to locate points on the graph to determine in terms of x and y. So all this is saying is you have a circle, you have a center, the distance between here and anywhere on the circle's edge is the same anywhere around. So that r will not change. So that's all that's saying. Okay, moving on. Any circle on a plane is defined by a center. We label the center HK from this point forward. So they will put HK instead of XY when we're talking about the center. And the radius R. R is that line right there. So in order to find R, if it's not already given, you use the distance formula. Which, if you remember, at the beginning of the year, I kind of showed you a trick so you don't have to use the distance formula like the big, long equation one. So I'll kind of give you a hint on that as well. Okay, sorry, move that. Okay. Any circle on a plane is defined by the center HK and the radius R. The values of H and K are determined where the center is located, while the value of R is determined the distance between the center of the circle and all the points on the circle. So I already mentioned that when I was describing that shape there. Okay, the standard form of an equation of a circle is x minus h and then squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So this is very important because they're either going to ask you to put it in standard form or they're going to ask you to put it in general form. So hopefully it'll stop shaking once I get this highlighted. If they ask you to put it in standard form, this is what they want. So they want something to look like that. Most of the questions on the tutorial are going to be of this kind. And then when you get to the mastery test, they're not. They're completing the square. Almost all of them. And it just takes a lot of work, but you'll get there. Okay, here is an example. Before, I'll go ahead and mention there was an activity. I once again skipped it, so I'll put on their activity in case you are following along with the tutorial and you're wondering like where that went. So after the activity you get to an example, and I think there's 2 examples. This is example number 1 because I labeled it. What is the equation of a circle with a center of 2, -5? So this is HK. As soon as you see the word center, you know that this is HK, and a radius of 4. So this is saying r is equal to 4. Substituting h equals 2, k is equal to -5, and r is equal to 4. In the standard equation for this, you get the following. So x stays, x minus 2. Then over here you get y minus -5. You end up getting a double negative, and if you remember, double negative turns into a positive. So they went ahead and changed that to +5 squared equals, and then you have r squared. R squared in this case would be 4 squared. 4 squared is 16. So they go ahead and just kind of leave one blank. They don't give you a lot of space to kind of rewrite this. So that is it for the first example. Okay, we're going to move on to example number 2. Okay, what is the equation of a circle with the center -3, -1, and it contains the point 1, 2. So it doesn't give you the radius, but it does give you, here is the center, and here's a point on the circle. So you're going to, anytime they give you the center and then a point, you're going to find the distance between the 2 points given. And then this is now your radius. Okay, so r squared equals based off of that. Okay, so the way they approach it is this way here. I do it a little bit differently. So they tell you to go ahead and just put everything into that big long distance formula. So I do it a bit different. Let's see if you remember how I do it. And that's how I'm gonna do it on the tutorial, so I do want you to pay attention. If you kind of lose me, then just use the distance formula. Okay, so it says, write the equation of a circle with the center of -3, -1. So I'm gonna put -3, -1. Here's my x, here's my y. Then I have another one, 1, 2. Here's my x, here's my y. What I do is I look at only the x's. How many units is in between -3 and 1? So I'm thinking of like a number line. So I have -3. I have -3, -2, 1, and then I have 0, and then I have 1. So between them I have from -3, I have 3 units. And then I have 1 unit on the other side of the 0. So it's a total of 4 units. So that's going to be 4 squared. Plus, now I'm going to do -1 and 2. So I have -1 on this side of the number line, and I have 2 on this side of the number line. Together, there's 3 units. Okay, that is my formula instead of having to go through this big long thing. So that's how I figured them out. Okay, 4 squared is 16, 3 squared is 9, all of this equals 25, but remember this gives you r squared. To be honest, that's actually what we want, because in the formula it's r squared, but just to keep it in line with what they want, they actually solved for r. So in order to get r, remember you take the square root of this and you get r is equal to 5. Now the other thing you could do, especially if you have one of those fancy calculators, a computer, or one of the apps downloaded that I showed you guys, you could just type all of that into the calculator, hit enter, and it's going to give you 5. So you could do that. Okay, So now we go back. We already knew what the center was. They gave us that at the beginning. This was h and k. So h is -3, k is -1, and we just figured out that r was 5. We're now going to put them into our formula. So this is going to be x, and since this is a negative, it's a double negative, this is going to be x plus 3 squared, y plus 1 squared is equal to 5 squared. But 5 squared is 25. That's why I said at this point here, you could have just left it as a 25, because it's what we end up getting. We go back to the square. Okay. So your final answer, just to kind of clean it up, would look like this if you were just kind of writing it on your paper. So you keep those pluses because of the double negatives, and you would not show the 5 squared, you would just go straight to the 25. Okay, so now we're going to move on to completing the square, which, to be honest, is the part that is more difficult. So when they ask you for the general form equation, it's different. It looks like this. It looks a lot more complicated. It just has a lot more numbers, but once we figure out how to do them, it's the same steps over and over again. Hopefully it won't get so bad. You might not always be given the equation of a circle in standard form, which is what we had just learned. You could use the equation of a circle in general form. Okay, so you're going to have A, B, C, D, and E. Those are all numbers. A and B are actually going to be the same. And then A, B, C, and D are all real numbers. So you're not going to see any imaginary numbers in there. You're not going to see something that when you square root it, it's going to have a negative or anything like that. Okay, so move this up just a little bit. When the equation of a circle is given in this form, it is more difficult to find the center and the radius of the circle. To change the circle's equation from general form to standard form, you will need to make use of an algebraic technique you may have seen before. This is called completing the square. Okay, so that is it for that one. Okay, so then in the reading, so if you're following along with the tutorial, they give you an example to follow, and it's actually a really easy example. I kind of just skipped through it and went to the next slide because this is the one that you want to actually practice with. They will not give you one as simple as the one before it. So in the next slide after that, you actually have to click and it'll tell you like every step that's going through there. So here is those clicks that you should be seeing. Okay, when you're given something like this, first thing you have to see is your A and your B. So if you're wondering, this is A, B, C, D, and E. I'm not going to label them every time, but I did it on this one just so you see where they're all placed. They're all either coefficients or constants. So coefficients are in front of the variables. Constant is that number at the end that does not have a variable. First thing you have to do is try to get everything off of the x squared and the y squared. And since they're actually the same, going to be the same every time, all you have to do is divide them by that number all the way across. So you start with what's given, and then we divide all the way across. So I'm showing that division on that step. So this is what it says that I just did. Divide the equation on both sides by the coefficient of x squared and y squared. So again, they're the same, and you should know in this case that it is the number 3. Once you divide, that goes away, that goes away. Negative 6 divided by 3 is -2. This turns into +4, and this turns into -4. So that's where those new numbers came from. Okay, so what are we going to do next? We're going to move this one to the other side. How do you get rid of a -4? You do the opposite, so you add 4 to both sides. So that's where it says here. Move the constant term to the right side by adding 4 to both sides. So those are the steps that they said. So now it looks like this. The only thing they did was move the 4. Okay, so now, if you notice from here to here, they have now grouped their x's together. So I'm going to highlight the ones that are x's. And then the ones that aren't, I'm going to leave them unhighlighted. Basically, they took those two there and they brought them together. And they moved the y squared over. So this is called rearranging. So your next step is to rearrange the terms on the left side to group the x squared with the x term and the y squared with the y term. So same thing I just said. Okay, next you get here. There are some new parts that you did not know how they got there. So if you look, those are the new parts that were added. This is the process of completing the square. I'm going to fill in the blanks just so you see it, but then I'll explain it out here to the side how I do the math on it. You're going to add the square of half of the coefficients of x and y to both sides. This is the step where you complete the squares. So this is the way I explain it. Take, if you're kind of looking off of the letters that we labeled up at the top, take your b value, so that's -2, put it under 2, and then square it, and then take it in steps. Okay, the next step would be to divide it. Half of -2 is -1, square it. And the final step is to actually square it, and you get a +1. That's why we get +1 there. That's how we got +1 there and there, because you put it on both sides. Okay, we're gonna do it again. This time you're gonna go to letter D, so it's the 4. Take half of the 4, square it. Take it in steps. Half of 4 is 2. Square that, you get 4. That's how we get +4 here and at the end. That's how we're getting those magical little numbers to pop up. Okay, the reason I want you to put it in parts is because that makes this next part easy when you get to this bottom part, okay? So what they did is they rewrote it. They just put a parentheses around the x's, a parentheses around the y's, and then they made this into a 9 because 4 plus 4 and 1 is 9. So they said to group the terms, note that the set of parentheses contain a perfect square trinomial. Basically, you're now going to rewrite this with this square. So it's x minus 1 squared, y plus 2 squared, and it's going to equal to 9. You put a plus between it. This looks like the equation of a circle. That was the whole point. Now, where did they get -1? Go back and look over here. See how this was -1 squared. Where did they get 2? See how this was 2 squared. So it's the step right before you get to that final adding part. So that's why I said take it in parts. We're going to do this over and over again until hopefully eventually it kind of sinks in. Okay. Once you do that, this is your answer to the equation of a circle. If they said, what was HK? It would be 1, -2. Because remember, it's the opposite of the sign that you're seeing. So this would be 1, this would be -2. This is your center. And then what was the radius? Be careful, the radius is not 9. This is r squared. So the radius would be 3. Because in order to get to there, you would do the square root of 9. Okay, so be careful. Don't write 9. That would be incorrect. Okay. Push this up to the last little part. When you compare the resulting equation with the standard form of the circle, you get this equation. And you're going to write down the things that I just wrote up at the top. 1, -2, and then r is 3. Just wanted to make sure you kind of saw it and saw the math on it as well. Okay. So we move on to the next part, and this is actually the last part. That's why I said I wish there was more examples, because it's gonna get really hard on the mastery test. Okay, so there is an activity. Again, if you're working on the activity, you can work on it. I did not choose to do it. So we're gonna go to the example. What is the standard form of this equation of the circle in general form? So this is what mainly your mastery test is going to be about, this type of example. I'm going to label this example. Go back and look. That way when I go to the mastery test, they're all labeled the same. I've got an example 1, I've got an example 2. So this is going to be example 3. That way if I say go back to look at example 3, you know which one I'm talking about. Okay. It says, I'll read it again. What is the standard form of this equation of a circle in general form? So here's the general form. They want you to use a method of completing the square. So we're going to practice that. I'm going to use this white space at the top to be able to do that. And then after that, you're going to fill in the information. Basically, what they're trying to get you to do is to complete the square. Unfortunately, most of the questions are going to be like this, and there's not a lot of practice. So again, I'm going to try to put a few more videos up there and a few more questions and worked out examples in those videos. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is we're actually going to be doing the steps that we just learned. So first thing I'm going to do is look at my x and y. If there's a number in front of them, I'm going to divide everything by that. Fortunately, there's not, so this is a little bit easier. So all I have to do now is start grouping them and move my 28 to the other side. Remember, when you move it to the other side, it turns into positive because you do the opposite. Okay, so I'm going to start up here. X squared plus 14x, because remember, I'm grouping my x's. And I like to do this. I leave a little bit of space, plus y squared minus 4y, leave a little bit of space, is equal to 28. And then 2 spaces here, because we're going to add 2 things there. Should have left a little bit more space over to the side, but it's okay. Okay, over here, I'm going to do those 2 things that I did before. Take your 14 divide that by 2 and square it. Half of 14 is 7. You're going to square that 7. So you're going to get 49. So on both sides, I'm adding 49. Okay, next I'm going to do the next number. So that's negative 4. Half of negative 4 is negative 2. I'm going to square it, and when I square it, I get plus 4. If you haven't noticed by now, you're going to get a positive every time. So you're always going to be adding to it. Okay, so it's going to be plus 4. Okay, so I have that worked out. Now I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it as a perfect square. And I'm going to add these up. 28 plus 49 plus 4 is 81. So I already have this math kind of already done, so that's why it's a little bit quicker. Okay, how do I write what's in the parentheses? So you know it's going to be an X, you know this one's going to be a Y. It's either going to be a plus or minus, so that's what we're going to go back to our work over here to the side. So this was 7 squared, so this is going to be plus 7. Over here, this was negative 2 squared, so this is going to be minus 2. So again, if you show your work, it's going to make it easier because then you know automatically what goes there. This is your equation of a circle. So I'm going to come over here and fill in the information I did. I just like to kind of start from scratch instead of filling in the blanks because then you kind of lose some of the steps. Okay, they said use this method to complete the square, and it can be written this way. So right here, this is where I put my 49. This is where I put my 4, and we also did plus 49 here, and we did plus 4 there. So they went ahead and rewrote what I had there. They didn't move the 28 until the very end. I do not like to do that at the end. I feel like the 28 could get lost with my other numbers, so I move it at the beginning, but they did it at the end. And still got 81, and this was X plus 7, and this was Y minus 2. Now what the mastery test will more than likely ask you, not the equation, just the equation. They're going to ask you also what's the center. And they're also going to ask you what's the radius. So let's practice that with this one, even though they didn't ask it. So the center is going to be negative 7, comma, positive 2. Remember to change those signs. And then 81 is not your radius. It's the square root of 81, which will be 9. So lastly, it says, write the process you would use to convert an equation for a circle in general form into standard form. So I'm going to very quickly give you some instructions as to what I think you should do when completing the square. And this is where we're going to end the video. So I am going to go ahead and tell you what I think you should do on each one. So step number 1. And this is for doing questions like the format like number 3. So step number 1, if A or B have a coefficient other than 1, I'm not going to write that down, but obviously if it's 1, it's just left off. But if they have a coefficient, then divide the whole equation by that number. Okay, I'm going to shorthand these so we don't have to write as much. Okay, so that's the first thing you do. Luckily, sometimes you don't have to do that stuff and you actually start with number 2. I like to move constant to other side. So I always start with this step first. I move the 28 to the other side. So I either add 28, subtract 4, whatever it is that I need to do. I do that step first. Number 3, after you move the constant, you're now going to group your X's and your Y's. But leave a blank after each and on the end of the last number. Okay, so what that's saying is what I did at the top. So up here, we'll use this example since it's kind of cut off, but after that X, I put plus and then a blank, and then I put plus and then a blank. And then on mine, I had the 28 on the other side and I had 2 blanks. So that's what I do to know that that's where I'm going to fill in my information. It allows you to not make a mistake and forget to add it to one side and not the other. Okay, step 4 is that side work that we did. So the side work is take half of the X or Y, because you're going to do the X first and then the Y. Okay. Then square it. Add these numbers in each blank. Okay? So do it in steps. Remember, there's a reason why we do it in steps. Yes, you could do it in your head, but you want to take half of it first, then you want to square it. That way you can see what that perfect square is at the end. Add these numbers in each blank. So the X number that you got, that goes at the end of the X. The Y number that you got, that goes at the end of the Y. And then you put both of those numbers after that answer that's on the equal side. Okay, so after you do that, you're going to rewrite as a factor of perfect squares. And I'll give you a quick example of what that is. And we're basically done after this. So it's going to be like x plus or minus some number. And that number, again, is the number that you got when you halved the x or when you halved the y. Squared plus y plus or minus some number, and it's squared, equals to r squared. So remember, that number you get at the end is r squared. If you were looking at the center will be this number and this number, but do not forget that your signs change. So I'm going to put signs change. Okay? And then finally, remember, your radius is equal to r squared, but then you have to take the square root of it, and that's going to give you your final number. Okay? So r squared is not your final number. It's whenever you take the square root of it, that is your final number. Okay, I want you to try it. I'm not going to lie. It's very difficult. I tried the mastery test, and I did not like it at all. So what I will do is, and if you need to copy these down, you might want to pause the video so you can get these, written down. But these are the steps for when the questions look like number 3, the one that we did on this page already. So if you want to pause it here so you can get those down, you may do that. So I'm about to show you just the first question on the mastery test. What I plan to do is I've got them all printed out. There's no answers on them, and I don't plan on giving you the answer to them, but I plan on helping you like how you need to get started. To be honest, the first one's not so bad. You could have done this one like necessarily without my help. It looks exactly like the ones we just did, so it would just be practice on that one. But there's a few on here that, depending on how you have to work them out, it's difficult to understand. Like this one was difficult to understand for me. I had to go back and I'm like, okay, I know how to get the center from the picture. It's not something that was taught to you in the tutorial. So I am going to go through, help you a little bit with that, but it will be for another video, because if not, this is going to be like an hour long and I don't want that. But I plan to do that maybe in a couple of days, give you a chance to maybe try the tutorial and the mastery test maybe on your own, see how you do, and then maybe you don't even need to watch the second video. Okay, I will see you guys for the next tutorial video. I do want to go ahead and I'll put this up. This is just something I did for myself to just kind of keep me organized. Unit 1 topics are going to be done after this. So if you get a mastery on this one, you're done. You should have gotten explaining volume formulas. You should have gotten those tutorials and mastery tests done. You should have gotten an 80% for you to get mastery. Using volume formulas, 80%. Then cross-section was omitted. You didn't have to do that. Post-test was omitted. You don't have to do that. So Unit 2 actually starts. So that one's done. Unit 2 is starting now, so it's actually this section that we're doing now. And it starts with the equation of a circle. There is a pretest in it. You need to try really hard on it, because the better you do on it, it lets you skip over certain mastery tests. So if you get all the questions right for equation of a circle, you wouldn't even have to do that mastery test. So again, try your hardest on that pretest to make sure that you can skip some things. So these are the things that you're going to have to cover in Unit 2. Equation of a circle, using coordinates to prove geometric theorems, using coordinates to complete perimeter and area. This is what we're on right now. It's pretty hard, but I'm going to do another video. We'll try to get there. And again, I'll see you again, not on the next tutorial one, but I'll talk to you guys again on the mastery test for help. Again, if you just flunk it and need some more help, that's what I'm going to be helping you guys with next. See you guys soon.